Right, President Cyril Ramaphosa set to address the nation tonight. Many expectations about this economic stimulus that could be announced. To talk about South Africa's social welfare net and really the impact on the poor right now, we're joined by Isobel Frye from the Poverty and Inequality Institute. Let's get some expectations from her. Isobel, thank you for talking to us. What are you hoping to hear from the President tonight?
Good evening, Francis, and thank you for this opportunity. What I'm hoping to hear is the announcement of the introduction of a universal basic income. This is something which many people have been calling for quite some time. The reason that we think it's necessary is that I think that's going to be the most important decision that the president's going to make regarding the recovery process. Right now, as part of a community constituency in Nedlock, we're receiving many hundreds of complaints every day of people who are just starving. The food parcels, which were introduced as an immediate relief policy, are just not able to reach everybody. In addition to that, we've seen a number of problems with regards to the distribution and also the quality. We've got a constitution that guarantees everybody access to income. And what we're saying is, in order to recreate the stimulus from demand and demand from below, what we need to see is a massive rollout of social grants. So people have been talking about, for instance, a top-up of the child support grant. But there are also many millions of people, Francis, who are neither between the ages of 18 up to 18 or from 59, so the ages of 18 to 59 who are not employed, and people who are not receiving unemployment insurance but who are just not employed. Yeah. We need the income to come to people. What we're hoping for is far more than just a top-up of the current grants, but we need to get income into the hands of people so they can buy food.
Let's just start with a basic universal grant that you spoke about. How much are we talking about? Every adult in South Africa receiving this cash injection for a month or more? Exactly how do you envisage it?
So some of the statistical calculations that we've run suggest that if every person who is not receiving a social grant currently receives a grant to the value of the food poverty line, which is 561 Rand for 3 months, we're looking at about 56 billion Rand. So while this seems like a huge input, it is, as you say, a necessary stimulus. We can't just have the stimulus going to big formal business. We need this to go in. So that's certainly a price tag which is affordable. If you look at the surplus in the unemployment insurance fund, we can also move other kinds of instruments, such as the immediate introduction of a transactions tax. We can also look at the issue of special COVID government bonds. A number of these instruments are being looked at currently. What we're saying is we can't wait any further. We need to have an immediate announcement tonight that people will find relief in the morning.
Yeah. Are there any gaps? I mean, if we look at the food parcels, it's been controversial. Earlier I heard some foreign nationals not being able to access those grants. Some people not registered for social grants at the moment, but out of work. Are there gaps if we try and roll something out? Are you worried about the implementation?
That's a very good question. We have heard a number of gaps in the current food parcels, and I think that comes down to great uncertainty as to eligibility. What we're looking at right now is the expansion through something called the Social Relief of Distress, which is a grant that is available to everybody in South Africa. The registration process would not be a problem if we applied our minds to it. In fact, last week, Namibia announced the introduction of a once-off payment of a universal basic income to everybody in the country using cell phones, both to register and to distribute the income. So we've got very clever minds who are looking at many other aspects of recovery. If we just had the political will, we could certainly see ways in which people would not be inconvenienced, people would not have to queue at SASSA offices, but would be able to find the relief. Government was talking about e-vouchers, or the use of an e-wallet. If we get the banks putting their heads together with the policymakers, the mechanisms are definitely there to embrace.
Yeah. And you're looking at a figure of around 500 Rand, if I remember correctly. So something you think is affordable for South Africa as we juggle our debt burden, our recession, our dire economic situation?
It's not an easy calculation to make. However, we also know that whatever kinds of top-level elite recovery will happen, if you look at the fraying of the social fabric, which is happening on a daily basis, the question of the ability of our country to recover is really what's at stake. And so the amounts that are required are amounts that we can find, if necessary, to borrow on terms and conditions that don't prejudice us as we recover and go forward. But this is it's not a luxury, Francis. Right now, if you just listen to people's calls and cries, this is something which could break our country.
Yeah. Finally, Isobel, do you have any ideas? We're not sure exactly what the president will say, but maybe talking about sort of coming out of lockdown. Will that be done gradually, as many have called for? How do you think we can get out of lockdown, get the most vulnerable back to work and still protect South Africans?
There have been a number of conversations about this at NEDLAC, and the gradual staggering of the reintegration of our economy is clearly something which needs to be looked at. What people are considering right now is a combination of the sectors that are required and the input as well as the downstream sort of value chains that are required in order to enable us to produce. But we're also looking at the health factors where people are able to work with some kind of social distancing, the provision of personal protection, the PPEs that are required in order to limit the infection, and also, of course, the big question of public transport. These are things that will require some kind of deliberation. But a staggering is something which we are needing, and the easing in. Of course, the question of education is a large one, which looms as many school children would need to congregate together. I think that a number of the education officials have done a very good job in terms of doing distance learning. But the reintegration, the sort of normalization would have to happen across the board from the cradle to the grave.
All right, thank you for your time this evening. Isobel Frye from the Poverty and Inequality Institute. So they want social grants to go up and basically every eligible South African adult to receive some form of cash payment just to get those people through who basically aren't eating at the moment.